The Buffalo Bills roster is in good shape right now, but what about future needs? We're exploring that and a whole lot more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. It is time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you take control of the discussion by sending in questions, comments, takes, whatever you have, and I respond to it here today on this episode. Some great stuff to get into, including a conversation about will the Bills pass more in 2024, and is Bobby Babich on the hot seat? But we start with this question from Owen, who says, what positions do you see the Bills having next offseason as potential needs, and what can happen during the season to change that answer from now until then? It's a good question. What are the future needs of the Bills? And obviously this season will shape a lot of that as different players emerge or some players regress. But as I see it, these are the potential needs next offseason. We start with running back, where it doesn't appear that James Cook and the Bills are close on a contract extension. I'm not sure what's going to happen this year that will change that. And so I could see the Bills needing another piece to this running back group to go with Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. I don't know that the Bills would go out and sign or draft a player that would come in and play 50% of the snaps like James Cook, or if more would go to Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, and then you kind of sprinkle in this other guy. But I think the most important thing is getting a back in the building that can give you the home run hitting and explosive elements that James Cook provided. So I can see running back being an important need. I can see interior offensive line being a need, where Connor McGovern and David Edwards, the starting center and left guard, are both expiring contracts. You certainly have some developing young players, but if those guys become starters, then you need more developing young players. So interior offensive line is a possibility. Defensive tackle stands out to me. Obviously, the Bills have some investments in Dwayne Carter and TJ Sanders and Deion Walker as second, third, and fourth round picks over the last 2 years. You'd like to think that those guys are your answers to go with Ed Oliver, but it's probably unlikely that all three wind up panning out. You could be in a situation where you need an answer at defensive tackle, particularly a guy that's a true one technique. Maybe defensive end, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, both expiring contracts at defensive end. You'd love to see Michael Hoyt and Landon Jackson and Javon Solomon really emerge, but you don't know. And, probably at least need to add some depth pieces there. Linebacker could be a possibility. Matt Milano on the last year of his contract. You could be looking for an answer there. Safety, who knows what's going to happen with Cole Bishop this year. Taylor Rapp will be in the last year of his deal going into 2026. So there's definitely some spots. And then, of course, wide receiver. Do the Bills come out of this year loving what they have in Palmer and Coleman and Elijah Moore? We'll see how that goes, but I can see that having varying outcomes. And so those are the positions that I look at as positions we could be talking about needing some answers next offseason. Zachary says, is it possible that Javon Solomon could get some run being the Sam linebacker, considering he came out of college best suited for a 3-4 defense as a stand-up backer? He could potentially get some run at that spot. I know Dorian Williams would most likely be the one taking those Sam snaps, but considering Solomon seems to be just as good of an athlete, he could take those snaps. Plus, with the concern over the linebacker position with Terrell Bernard and Milano and their health for a full season, it would be in the Bills' best interest to keep Dorian in his natural role. I don't see this the same way that you do in terms of the curiosity to play Javon Solomon as a Sam linebacker. I think he was drafted for a very specific role in mind, and that's to be a designated pass rusher. I think that's where you get the most out of Javon Solomon. He had very few reps of off-ball linebacker in college, like very few. I don't agree with you that he's a similar type athlete. Javon Solomon has an RAS score of a 704. Dorian Williams is an 881. Dorian Williams runs 449 in the 40. Javon Solomon runs 472. So I think you are taking a hit there in terms of speed and ability to function in space. And also, the Bills don't really run a lot of base defense. You know, we're talking about playing Sam linebacker, strong side linebacker. You know, the Bills ran 3.5% of their snaps in base defense last year, the lowest in the NFL. The next lowest was the Commanders at 6%, then the Ravens at 8.6%, Houston at 12.2%, Philly 14.5%, the Chargers 15.2%. Those are all really good NFL defenses outside of maybe the Bills. But the Bills are just not a base defense team. The league average is 23% base. The Bills are at 3.5%. So I don't think you mess with this. I think you leave Javon Solomon in the role that he's best, which is as a designated pass rusher. And I think you allow Dorian Williams to get those snaps if the opportunity presents itself on a small, percentage of snaps. So I don't see this the same way. I'm not as curious as you are. I would tap into Dorian Williams and his physicality and his proven ability to play off the ball, his athleticism, and I keep Javon Solomon in that developing designated pass rusher role. The next question that I have, several people sent this in. I got a lot of questions about the second-round picks and TJ Sanders and how he's unsigned, and then what's going on with Shamar Stewart with the Bengals, their first-round pick. So let's kind of explore these things. We'll start with the TJ Sanders situation. So the Bills have signed all of their draft picks except for TJ Sanders, the second-round pick. Right now, 30 of the 32 second-round picks in the NFL are not signed. There's a league-wide problem right now with signing second-round picks, and it's rooted in the first two picks in the second round. Pick 33, linebacker Carson Schlesinger to the Browns. Pick 34, Jaden Higgins, a wide receiver to the Texans. They signed fully guaranteed contracts. That is unprecedented. It's never happened before for second-round picks. And so now you have this situation where there's precedent. Why wouldn't every second-round pick now get a fully guaranteed deal like the first two picks of the round did? So now we're at this standstill, and someone's going to have to budge, whether it's the teams and fully guaranteeing the contracts of second-round picks or the players saying, you know what, it's cool that those guys got fully guaranteed deals. We don't need it. It's complicated, right? And so we'll see who budges. We'll see who flinches, but there is a league-wide problem with signing second-round picks. It's not a Bills issue. It's an across-the-league issue based on the precedent, the unprecedented precedent that was set with the Texans and Browns and them giving fully guaranteed deals to their respective choices at picks 33 and 34. As for Shamar Stewart, Bengals first-round pick, defensive end, he's unsigned. That's a really sticky situation. He wouldn't even sign the waiver to participate in the OTAs and rookie camp. And the issue from that perspective is that there's language in the rookie contract that is being presented to Shamar Stewart from the Bengals concerning the voiding of future guaranteed money. And the Bengals want to include language that allows them to void future guaranteed money if Stewart were to default on the contract in any year. And Shamar Stewart is saying, I would like the same language used by other Bengals first-round picks. I don't want a new precedent for me. I'd like to have the same deal, same language that was given to other first-round picks by the Bengals. So the Bengals are trying to set a new precedent, which is always tricky, like we just talked about with second-round picks. But I will say in defense of the Bengals, they're not necessarily proposing something that's not seen across the league. It's not like unforeseen. And I have plenty of criticism for the Bengals in their front office. They deserve a lot of that. But they are trying something new based on the precedent they've set with their own first-round picks. And Shamar Stewart doesn't want it. And you could tell he's even brought up the Trey Hendrickson situation. You could tell there's something from his behalf where he's just not willing to trust that Bengals front office. And he's not willing to sign this deal. And so we'll see how it goes. I mean, if it gets to a certain point, he sits out this year, he can go back into the 2026 draft. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But obviously, a sticky situation with Shamar Stewart in the Bengals. It's rooted in default language, and the Bengals are trying to implement something new, not necessarily new to the league, but new to their first-round picks. And Shamar Stewart says, I'd like to have the same language you've given other first-round picks. It's not time to set a new precedent on me. And so the default language would be rooted in, hey, if something happens off the field, the suspension, different things, that he would lose future guaranteed money, and he doesn't want to do that. All right, coming up next here, we're going to get into some good conversation about the Bills' defensive line and if it's the best yet under Sean McDermott, and is Bobby Babich on the hot seat? We'll do that here in just a moment. Be sure to stick with me. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Folks, the insights are surprising. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Plus, it's super convenient. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for those long-term goals. Plus, it's easy to collaborate. You can manage money with your partner more smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On NFL for half off your first year. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's keep it moving here. The next one comes from Mark. Mark says, with the way the team is currently constructed, what, if any, wrinkles could you see being implemented on offense, such as trying to catch defenses with hurry up, running 13 personnel, etc.? It's a good question. And Anthony Prohaska of Cover One doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to ask him to come on and do an episode with me where we forecast a lot of the different scheme stuff offensively and defensively. But I think the biggest idea that I have right now for the offensive side of the football is the pistol formation. And we saw some photos and some video coming out of OTAs and minicamp where the Bills were working on pistol formation. And let me tell you what pistol formation is. It's shotgun, but the running back is lined up behind the quarterback, like directly behind the quarterback. Which is different, right? Normally in shotgun, the running back is aligned next to the quarterback. So regular shotgun, and behind the quarterback is a running back. And so there's a lot more depth in that running back alignment. And so what are some of the benefits of incorporating pistol? Well, it's number one, it's a very common wrinkle for teams that have a athletic dual threat quarterback. So Josh Allen would certainly qualify. One of the things that I like most about pistol is that you get running backs with more depth, so that way they can build more momentum going towards the line of scrimmage when they take handoffs. So whenever you run the ball out of shotgun, the running back receives the ball kind of from a static position lined up next to the quarterback. With pistol, they're further back, but they also can get more momentum going, working towards the line of scrimmage. It can help with your play action game. You can build a lot of different RPO stuff, run pass option stuff out of the pistol. And I think it's also just harder to determine formational strength. So if you think, typical football formations, one side of the formation, right or left, is going to have more eligibles on it. When you're in pistol, because the running back is lined up directly behind the quarterback, you can have even formations where you have 5 eligibles, and you have 2 to the left, 2 to the right, 1 directly behind your quarterback. So it's not a lot more. It's impossible for defense to know the formational strength. And so you can do some interesting things off of that. If you want to run option, you can do some interesting layers with the pistol formation. There's no real downside to it. It wouldn't be a primary thing that you do, but it could be a wrinkle that you add. I'm always a fan of working in hurry up. The Bills do work in tempo pretty well. I'm hoping for more play action. You know that for sure. Maybe the Bills will have a running back screen game. We'll see how that goes as well. But right now, my leading thought offensively, which was the question, is about the pistol formation. And like I said, I'll reach out to Anthony Prohaska. We'll talk about this stuff in a future episode as well. Good Deal says, is this the best defensive line on paper that the Bills have had under Sean McDermott? I hope so. I think a lot of that's rooted in Joey Bosa and what he offers this team. And do we get a step from Greg Rousseau? Do we get 2023 Ed Oliver? Do we get 2023 Daquan Jones? What do these young players do? Sanders, Jackson, Walker, what type of impact do they make? Can Carter take a step? I think I would say this. I think there's the most ceiling of any defensive line yet under Sean McDermott. This group provides the most ceiling. It's hard for me to say that it's the best. I go back to 2022, and the idea of that line with Von Miller, like when he was not, before he tore his ACL, Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, A.J. Epinesa off the edge. You had Basham and Lawson as well, but at D tackle was Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips. Like, that group should have been the best. Unfortunately, they were all injured, all of them, at different points. So this one, I think I can agree on this. This defensive line on paper has the highest ceiling of any group yet under Sean McDermott. And I should have mentioned that 2022 group also included Leonard Floyd, right? So was a pretty loaded situation there. So we'll see how it evolves. It certainly has the highest ceiling, but it all depends on how these young guys come together. And then, of course, how your veterans acclimate and what type of impact they have. I think it's got the possibility, but like everything, it has to come together. Bills WZA says this: I enjoyed your recent Bills squad where you broke down Joe Brady and Bobby Babich. Given the disappointing defensive performance last season, if the defense is not markedly improved after this upcoming year, would you predict that Bobby Babich would be on the hot seat? If so, which of the Bills' defensive assistants would be the next man up? I think there is pressure on Bobby Babich. I do think that, as I've went through so many times, the context of last year, with Babich being a rookie defensive coordinator with all those variables, it's a trying situation. I think the Bills believe in Bobby Babich based on the years that he's had coming up under Sean McDermott. He's been specifically groomed for this role. So I think he does have a bit of a leash. And, I think in the NFL, everything is so performance driven, right? It was either good or it was bad, right? And you can get caught up on that. But I think at some point, you also have to ask yourself the question, like, is this person the right one for the role? And that might not always, the answer to that might not always be rooted in what they've done has been successful. Like, I think you could look at Howie Roseman and his time as the general manager with the Eagles. And the guy had a ton of black eyes. There was times where we thought, can Howie Roseman even draft well? And nobody would even question that right now. So, but the bottom line is Philly believed that Howie Roseman was the right GM for the job and stuck with him even through a lot of mistakes. So that's the thing with Bobby Babich. Like, no, last year was not what anybody wanted defensively. But you've groomed him for this moment. You believe in him. Like, to me, it's not so much because the defense was bad. It's, did you lose your belief in what he can do? I think there's too many instances in the NFL where coaches and general managers don't get the opportunity to apply the lessons that they learn in the spot where they are. So I think there is pressure, but I still think there's a lot of belief in Bobby Babich, and I think he's going to get a full opportunity to see this thing through. Now, the interesting part of your question was, like, who's the next man up? I can think of three people, like, that would be internal, if you will. One would be Ryan Nielsen, who's been a DC. He was the Jags DC last year. Then he was with Atlanta, the Saints before that. Now, I would say if Bobby Babich is on the way out, that probably doesn't bode well for Ryan Nielsen and his impact on this defense. But I have to at least include him because he's experienced in the role and has been highly thought of across the league. Al Holcomb is certainly a name to invoke. Has 6 years of experience with Sean McDermott. Was the Cardinals defensive coordinator in 2018. He was the Browns defensive run game coordinator in 2019. Went back to Carolina in 2022. He was the assistant head coach and actually was their interim defensive coordinator. So I look at Al Holcomb as a possibility, who's currently the Bills linebackers coach. And then internal, but obviously not internal, is John Butler. John Butler is the guy that you thought could be in the mix to be the DC. They went with Bobby Babich. They promote Bobby Babich. John Butler, pulls out and wants to go be a DC for someone else. He really hasn't gotten that opportunity, but could the Bills go back to him and say, hey, probably should have just made you the DC whenever we went with Bobby, but we're going to go with you now. We just take the job. So those would be some of the names that I think would be in the conversation, but hopefully this is just speculation. Bobby Babich, gets this defense on track. Every reason that we were excited about Bobby Babich going into the opportunity, it's still true. Like, he's had such great success coaching all the different things that he's coached in Buffalo. Now let's see what he can apply from year one with better coaching and better talent around him on the defensive side of the football. So I think there's pressure. I still think there's a lot of belief in Bobby Babich, and we'll see how this season goes. All right, coming up next, will the Bills pass more? Could Brian Daboll come back if Joe Brady leaves? And, of course, which player from the Super Bowl rosters would I add to this one? We'll do that here coming up next, so be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, let's get back into it. This next one comes from Charlie, who says, considering Joe Brady's pedigree with passing offenses, how can we tell that the recent tendency toward run-heavy offense is his preferred path and not just the best way to handle the transition at wide receiver over the last couple of years? Shakir, Kincaid, Palmer, Samuel Coleman, and more all have potential large upsides this year. If some or all take a step, I can see them leaning into the pass early to try and get into positive game scripts, or would they stay committed towards a run-first attack? It's a good question. And the Bills still, they throw the ball more than they pass it. Let's acknowledge that. The Bills are not a high-volume passing team, but they still pass the ball more than they run it. I think only 3 teams last year had more runs than passes. So it's still a pass-heavy league, but the element of the run is very important. A lot of different thoughts on this. First of all, I think it is fair to point out the strengths of last year's group. It was your offensive line, was your running back room. It was better than your pass catchers, right? So you could look into it and say, got some concerns defensively. We're better with our O-line and running backs than we are with our pass catchers. Let's do that. Let's let that be our formula to win football games. I can understand that for sure. And on one hand, I mean, it's obviously the right approach. It was absolutely the right approach. Offense wasn't the problem. It was arguably the best offense the Bills have ever put on the field. So they certainly ran the team optimally for the circumstances that they had, which is a sign of good coaching. Simultaneously, Sean McDermott has had continuous messaging about being two-dimensional on offense and controlling the line of scrimmage. So I think there's some McDermott influence in this direction of the offense, which is very different than what it was under Brian Daboll and even Ken Dorsey. But the one guy that finally did that was Joe Brady when he took over as OC, and he's done it now for a year and a half. So I hear you, but I also think about what Joe Brady has actually done, Sean McDermott's messaging, the success that the Bills had with this style of play. So I'm personally not expecting a dramatic shift to being more pass aggressive. But I think if you wanted to convince yourself that, hey, this passing game is more potent, young players emerging, new skill sets, get leads, get into positive game scripts, I get that too. But I think that this team wants to be two-dimensional on offense. They want to control the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to run the ball a pretty high amount. And running the ball is not bad. Can we acknowledge that? These are your top 7 teams last year in percentage of offensive plays that were runs. Number 1, the Eagles. They were pretty good, right? Number 2, the Ravens. Pretty good, right? Number 3, the Packers. 4, the Steelers. Okay, there's your outlier. Still a playoff team. Number 5 is the Bills. Number 6 is the Commanders. Number 7 is the Lions. I mean, you got 7 playoff teams there. You got 3 of the 4 conference championship teams. It's okay to be a high volume run team. The best teams in the league are. So let's acknowledge that too. I feel like we want these passing plays. We want Josh Allen to have big stats, but what's actually winning? Being two-dimensional, controlling the line of scrimmage, pounding the rock. Works. Proven formula in the league. Luke says, on your next herd mentality, can you bring up Joe Brady leaving and then possibly Brian Daboll coming back? Would he be welcomed? I don't think so. I've believed for a while that there's been friction between Brian Daboll and Sean McDermott. And when Brian Daboll came back in his return game to Buffalo, was it Sunday Night Football? Could be Thursday Night Football. I don't remember. The Bills won the game. Remember, there was some controversy with Darren Waller and did Taron Johnson interfere with him or whatever. That post-game handshake between Brian Daboll and Sean McDermott made it abundantly clear that there absolutely is friction. They wouldn't even look at each other. It was the fastest handshake you've ever seen, and they were looking in the other direction. It was very much like, hey, we're both head coaches. We have to do this. We don't like each other, and we're not going to look at each other. Compared to the way that Brian Daboll was interacting with, former players. And you would think I guess, Daboll is part of Sean McDermott's coaching tree. You would expect like, hey, I'm happy for you. Congratulations. We played a game, a little bit more of a sincere post-game moment as opposed to looking the other way and like the fastest handshake you've ever seen. I posted it on Twitter after it happened. So maybe I'll pull that video and show everyone, but look it up if you can. I don't think Daboll and McDermott are on the type of terms that's going to welcome him back to be the Bills offensive coordinator. Adam says, what one player from the 4 Super Bowl teams rosters would you add today to get us a Super Bowl victory, and why? The answer to this every single time is Bruce Smith. Josh Allen is certainly making this interesting, but the best Buffalo Bill of all time is Bruce Smith. And you talk about defensive line impact. That's been the problem for this team in the postseason. Yeah, give me arguably the best defensive lineman in the history of the game. It will always be Bruce Smith. Anytime I can add a former Bills player to the current Bills, it will always be Bruce Smith. Josh Allen's a quarterback. Now you get in some situations where you don't have Josh Allen, maybe you go for a different player. Bruce Smith. Absolute animal. Go back and I've done it. I went back and watched just random games of Bruce Smith, one of the most dominant football players I've ever seen. The size, the athleticism, the bend, just unreal. Just to take over games. And remember, this guy played right defensive end in a 3-4 defense as a 5 tech. Like, that's not even a sack position. Dude was killing people. Every time it's Bruce Smith. All right, folks. There you have it. Herd mentality in the books this week. Thanks so much for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. Look forward to catching up with you again real soon.